This is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the beating heart of American motorsport. Since this venue opened in 1909, the best have raced and won at Indy. Today, the SRO's Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS, is joined by the Intercontinental GT Challenge, powered by Pirelli, for an end-of-season extravaganza for the North American teams and the fourth round of 5 for the IGTC competitors that have been traveling around the world since the season opened at Bathurst back in the spring. Greetings from Speedway, Indiana, home of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. My name is Ryan Marine. Calvin Fish and Bob Varsha joined me in the broadcast booth. Down in the pit lane is Amanda Busick as we get ready for qualifying for this, the Indianapolis 8-hour, the season finale for Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS, and round 4 of 5 for Intercontinental GT Challenge, powered by Pirelli. If you've been following the North American Championship all season long, this will look a little bit different than the qualifying sessions we have seen all season long. Instead of single drivers split into 2 groups, this is 3 different drivers sharing the car at various points, 3 distinct sessions, but their best lap times are averaged together, and it is that average that will initially send us the back of the field. It will set the grid, but it will also send a certain number of cars to Super Pole qualifying later today. So a whole lot still to be decided, Cal.
Yeah, very much so, and this field is so tight, Ryan. In what we call pre-qualifying, which was a practice session earlier today, the full 22-car field was separated by a mere 1 second and 15 thousandths. So that's how tight it is between the 22 cars that are represented here. A lot on the line with our American Championships coming down to the wire, the penultimate round for the IGTC, Bob. So it's going to be an interesting mix. I think there's some cars out there that really didn't show their true hand in that practice session, and I think everyone's talking about BMW. They lined up like 4th and 5th this morning, so we'll see what happens when it's time to play.
Gamesmanship is a big part of racing, no doubt about it, and you're right. We saw perhaps not a true measure of just how competitive this field is. There you see the cars being worked on in preparation for a very interesting qualifying program. I really enjoy the way they qualify in this series. And we have to keep in mind, too, that the Intercontinental GT Challenge has important points for both manufacturers and drivers. And after what we saw this morning and what we've seen in virtually all of the sessions thus far this weekend, there's a bunch of drivers out here who are not afraid to get their elbows out.
No, many come in here with high expectations, including many of the finest teams in GT racing coming from further afield. IGTC competitors like a WRT, which for so many years has fought for and won championships in Intercontinental, as well as other far-flung championships around the world. But, Cal, they're going to be tested by many of North America's best here, too, this weekend. It's an interesting mix of teams that don't necessarily know each other all that well, sharing the grid here at Indy.
Yeah, and I think for some of our Fanatec GT teams, they've got a double agenda, right? They're out to get the best possible position, maybe win a championship with the Fanatec GT point standings as they are. And then some of those teams have been nominated as manufacturer representatives for the IGTC as well. So I think it's a question of ticking certain boxes. For some teams, it's really getting to that 50% mark in the 8-hour race here tomorrow, so they will indeed score points. Then they got to factor in where their nearest challenges are in the point standings for the Fanatec GT, and then maybe they can let the gloves off a little bit and go for it in terms of the overall result for the day.
Well, that is for the race, but for now we focus on this 3-driver qualifying. Again, it is an average of the best lap from each of the 3 drivers in these lineups that will set the back of the grid. The top 10 advance to Super Pole. That's a single driver format coming up later on this evening into the twilight. That should be a lot of fun to set the front of the field. You don't necessarily need to be the fastest in this session, guys, but if you want to start up front, you'd better be in that top 10.
And again, you've got a risk versus reward, right? Everyone needs to get a run, so you can't afford to throw the car off the racetrack and not have you driver number 2 or driver number 3 get a run in. But just kind of gradually ramping up. The cars are not refueled during this session, so they're going to be their heaviest now. Predictably the slowest potential, because a heavier race car is a little bit slower, but this racetrack will rubber in as well, so you expect to see the fastest times coming with driver 3 on board in that 3rd qualifying session here this afternoon.
eye candy aplenty for the GT racing enthusiast. Acura, Porsche, Ferrari, Mercedes, BMW, just to name a few. There's an Aston Martin coming through the picture to further illustrate the point. It's a great mix, 22 cars set to go, and it's really anybody's guess who's going to be in that top 10. There are some favorites in the paddock, but to your point earlier, Bob, maybe not everyone's showing their full hand.
Right, and the track is a consideration too. Remember, we had very heavy rain yesterday, mud just beyond the track verges. We've seen cars get stranded out there in earlier sessions. Track is a lot drier now, and it has evolved quite a bit. But I think we're going to see even more as the day goes on and the track continues to rubber back in, because it was washed yesterday.
Let's talk about the track here, Calvin. It is the infield road course at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, just under 2.5 miles in length. 14 turns, pretty flat, not much in the way of elevation change, but there are some technical portions.
There really are, and you start the lap crossing the yard of bricks, of course, as we're seeing here with the 28 machine. They, in fact, laid down the fastest time this morning with Klaus Bachler on board. And then there's a heavy brake zone, so the fastest part of the racetrack is right here for turn 1, about just shy of 165 miles an hour. Roll through turn 1 at about 50 miles an hour, very technical sector here. Turn 1 through turn 4, you're really setting up to get good exit through this right-hander and then get a flying start through that chicane. You'll see through a lot of the areas of this racetrack, you can really get up the curbs right there. Basically, this car and the setup of these GT3 machines takes that very easily down Holman Boulevard at about 150 down in the brake zone for turn 7.
Now, in case you think we're just warming up here, these are very important laps for these drivers. They have very little time, 15 minutes for the session for each driver, and you have to get your tires into their operating window. You want to get those Pirellis just perfect for your push laps, because you aren't going to get many.
First flying laps about to be recorded. We saw young Eric Filgaris, the Floridian, one of the first to cross the line. It is the 45 of Madison Snow that does lodge the first official time lap, and the benchmark is a 124.193. A couple other cars crossing the line, checking in with lap times of their own, but Madison Snow so far the quickest. Filgaris with a decent lap coming, though. This is a car fighting for a championship in the North American title hunt, and they put in the second fastest time on timing and scoring after lap number 1.
Yeah, we expect to see these fast laps a little bit below. That fastest lap this morning was a 123.25 in pre-qualifying. Reflect back to last year, pole was set by Jules Gounon at a 122.19, so that's maybe the target we're looking at, maybe getting into the 22s here this afternoon.
That was a pretty epic lap last year from Jules Gounon, who said earlier in the day during the final practice, this track hasn't been kind to me.
This could be a car to keep an eye on here. Always seems to be this beautiful livery on the Mercedes. It's Mauro Engel behind the wheel, Mercedes factory driver. Won just about everything there is to win in GT racing. Crosses the line and setting up now to go on his first real push lap.
Yeah, and he was one of the drivers we spoke to just after the drivers meeting yesterday, who said they're very concerned with these cooler conditions, anticipated for race day that may swing it the way of BMW, but qualifying today, see the 27 car in trouble again. This car had a couple of offs in this morning's pre-qualifying session.
TR3 Racing, the team. Paul Keebler at the controls. First race back since Road America.
Doesn't have a ton of GT3 experience, so just trying to find his feet, so to speak. So we see Engel starting this fly here, as you can see, immediately purple in Sector 1.
I got to know Mauro Engel during his days in the Formula E All-Electric World Championship. Just a wonderful human being. Speaks, I believe, 5 languages fluently. Lovely guy.
Quick racing driver as well, native of Munich, now calls Monaco home as the overall best middle sector, trending towards the provisional pole in this first of 3 qualifying sessions. Again, it's the average of which that will ultimately determine who advances to Super Pole and then the final positions from 11th on back.
You can see Madison Snow there just took away that fastest first sector from Engel. He still holds down second. Let's see where this lap time puts him. He immediately goes to the top there with a 123.7.
Mauro Engel New benchmark time, but this is a car to keep an eye on. Wright Motorsports, they had a great weekend the last time out at Sebring International Raceway. Madison Snow joining this team midway through the season. Comes across the line, puts up a decent time. Currently second quickest at the moment.
Yeah, just 600ths behind that fast lap of Maro Engel. Porsche's looking pretty strong here. Had 2 cars in the top 3 in pre-qualifying. They currently got 2 cars in the top 3 as well here this afternoon. As Filgaris lays down a lap, which is good enough for P3.
Boy, Madison Snow lost quite a chunk of time in the 3rd sector, which is basically a couple of long sweeping turns onto the front straightaway. So it's kind of hard to lose if you've got your right foot flat on the floor.
Yeah, also includes turn 12 here, Bob, as well, so that could be a little bit of a factor there. This is the corner we're looking at right there. You have to nail this. It's so precise. You got to really not be late with your steering it, but otherwise you're just going to struggle to get the power down early enough for this launch onto the front straightaway.
Maro Engel for Grupa M up onto the front straightaway here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway one more time, halfway through this session, and does reset the benchmark time. It's a 1:23.421, it would appear. Looking in at one of the other Mercedes teams. This is Jules Gounon, who we mentioned earlier.
Currently 9th.
Yeah, this is a good one, though. He's got a flyer underneath his belt right now. Puts him up to 2nd. Couple of tenths back. So Mercedes coming to the forefront here as we get into the qualifying showdown.
That was a heck of a first sector time from the 77.
BMW's playing a waiting game.
That they are. Let's see. This might be the opening salvo from the BMW camp. Across the yard of bricks. Looks like that was not a flyer. 94 car a little bit further down. Slots in P5, 3rd fastest of the North American Pro cars. And guys, let's talk about the distinction. We've got 3 different classes here. IGTC Pro, Fanatec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS Pro, or we'll call it North American Pro, and then a Pro-Am class. Cal, what is the difference between the 3?
Well, essentially, they're all running homologated GT3 platforms, but it's really the driver grading. So you can have a Mercedes that's in IGTC Pro, also running in Pro-Am. The car's basically identical other than the setup that the team elects to put on the race car for this particular circuit, but it's all down to the driver gradings. In IGTC Pro, you can have 3 of the strongest drivers in the world. You can literally have what we call 3 platinum-rated drivers, top of the tree. Whereas in Fanatec GT, you must have a silver driver as part of that driver lineup, and in Pro-Am you've got to have a bronze driver as part of that lineup. So it's really, that's the delta, that's the difference between the performance factor of these cars here this weekend.
Now, you talked about the variety and diversity of brands and manufacturers we see out on track. They are equalized, if you will, by the process of a balance of performance, where they use various factors based on the best that they can get from the teams, which is always a little bit of a controversy, and takes that data and equalizes the cars in terms of lap time.
We were watching Augusto Farfus a few moments ago, runner-up at the Kyalami 9-hour earlier this season in IGTC competition, and Augusto slots in P5, P3 out of the IGTC Pros at the moment. This is the Racer's Edge Motorsports Acura NSX GT3 Evo, known as an Acura here in North America as well as in the Chinese market. It's a Honda elsewhere. Kyle Marcelli has been drafted in to help this team out here this weekend, and he's got some recent track time in this car with this team at this track, and they elected to skip some of the test sessions earlier in the weekend because they felt pretty well prepared given their recent seat time here.
Yeah, I think that may have backfired on them a little bit because it rained so heavily here yesterday, so I think they elected to give up the test day on Wednesday knowing that they had good track knowledge, maybe wait for that track to rubber in and have more relevant test time, but then we didn't really see any running yesterday other than a very wet nighttime session, which 9 cars elected to actually even go out for, so probably on the back foot a little bit.
John Maraki does run a tight operation at Racer's Edge. He's had some great drivers, including current Trans Am champion Chris Dyson. He does his own engineering, or at least he did when my son drove for his team.
It's a great little team based out of DeLand, Florida. They've won a lot of races and championships in SRO America at the GT3 level over recent years and are a big part of Honda and Acura's North American racing program.
As you mentioned, John is also a bit of a physiologist. You drive for John, you're going to get a workout list, a very specific number of things that he wants you to do to be in top physical shape.
He is a certified personal trainer, so yep, that does absolutely factor in. Let's give you an update on how things stand here. 3.5 minutes or thereabouts to go. It's Engel, Eng, and Getz, the top three, all from the IGTC Pro ranks. Then it's the top of the American Pro Class runners with Madison Snow in 4th. Augusto Farfus with the 5th quickest lap in this session. Then Filgaris, Marcelli, the Bimmer World Machine, Jonathan Wee, and Samantha Tan, the top 10. And the top 10's the cutoff we're looking for in this session because it is the top 10 that will advance to the pole shootout coming up later on this evening.
Yeah, and just as the BMW's got in the mix, we're up in P2. Getz take that P2 position away, so it's Mercedes 1-2 once again. See what Farfus has here, currently in P5 as he crosses the stripe, moves up to P4. So it's 4 IGTC Pro cars, 1 through 4 overall right now.
Yeah, but look how close it is there. It is less than half a second between the top 5 at the moment, and we expect more fast laps to come in as we get deeper into this session. But time's starting to run out. Just over 2 minutes on the clock in the first of 3 qualifying sessions here at Indy.
Yeah, and you talk about that margin, it's only 0.15 second between the top 4, so it's really tight there between the 2 Mercedes and the 2 BMWs.
On board, Adam Adelson going for a Pro-Am title here this weekend, joined by Elliott Skier, and IndyCar star Callum Ilott completes the lineup here at Indianapolis.
Listen in here, see if he can keep it wide open through 14. Really have to set the car up. What a season this team has put together, Ryan. Just remarkable, making that move from GT4 competition up to this very steep GT3 category, and taking it in their stride, have the championship lead by a mere 3 points over the 0-4 car in that Pro-Am category.
But running the 992 variant 911 this weekend, they've campaigned the previous generation 991.2 for the bulk of the season, so there is a variable for them to contend with here this weekend. We look in at TRG, the Racers Group, esteemed team in North American endurance racing. Looks like it'll be Derek DeBoer, the bronze-rated driver in this lineup, currently behind the wheel.
Had a little blip in pre-qualifying, lost a little bit of track time this morning, but not as much as the 21 car that we were just looking at a moment ago. They lost the majority of the session with some kind of electronic launch glitch on that Ferrari, so a couple of teams here, not ideal prep for this pre-qualifying session, moving into quali here.
The Racers Group, owned by Kevin Buckler out of Petaluma, California. He used to race Porsches, and what a start his team got off to. At one point, they won the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona overall, beating the prototype cars. Then they won their class at Le Mans, and then they had some other, bit of a lurch there. They had another great performance, so at one point, Kevin Buckler's Transporter had 3 priceless Porsches on it, winners of 3 of the biggest races in the world.
Stephen Grove here.
Earl Bamber's team of Australia.
Yeah, Bamber was up on the wheel here, so these are running for IGTC points as well. So a couple of the Porsche representation cars are actually Pro-Am entries, as we see the checkered flag is out for this first quali session.
Interesting to notice the number of laps completed by each car. You thought the BMWs might be hiding their candle under a basket. Philip Eng did just 3 laps to be 3rd quickest in the session. Augusto Farfus, I should say, 4 laps, and other teams did as many as 10 laps.
A divergence in strategy, that's for sure. The Grove car electing to head to the pit lane. Earl Bamber joined by Stephen and Brenton Grove here this weekend on a big weekend for Antipodean Motorsport. It is the Bathurst 1000 weekend down under, and the Grove team has a pretty major effort going on down there. We can talk more about that throughout the course of the weekend, but the fastest man in Q1 is standing by with our Amanda Busick.
Absolutely, Ryan, and quickest here in driver qualifying one. And Mauro, I saw you have a pretty in-depth conversation with Luca as he was getting ready to get in. What information did you relay over to him?
Just the track conditions and how the car's handling. It's obviously a little bit warmer now, but yeah, just giving him the feedback from the run.
When you talk about track conditions, what can you tell us about grip out there at the moment?
It's fairly low over the whole weekend so far. I mean, we're a long way off the lap times we saw last year, but I guess it's the same for everyone.
Thank you, Mauro. A bit of a pole position savant this season, guys.
Mauro has had plenty of success in qualifying, not just this year, but his entire career. Picked up a class win at the 24 Hours of Daytona to start his 2023 campaign off on the right foot, and he was flogging that Mercedes around this track. As Bob said, though, only took him a handful of laps to find the pace, and as usual, Mercedes Group AM factoring in towards the very front.
Yeah, I think the battle in the 8 hour tomorrow is going to be intense between those big squads that we have representing Mercedes and BMW.
Let's look at results from the first session of qualifying. It is Group AM sitting there at the top thanks to that great lap from Mauro Engel. We saw Mercedes take the top 2 spots, but only 66 thousandths between them. Then a pair of WRT BMWs before you get to the first of the North American runners. Wright Motorsports and RS1, a pair of Porsches showing strong pace. Racer's Edge, great job by Kyle Marcelli. First time on these Pirelli tires for him in quite some time. Ahead of Bimmer World, Sky Tempesta, the first of the Pro-Am class cars, ST Racing, right now holding the final top 10 position.
A name that jumps out at me is 11th place, Manny Franco, racing here for the first time. They had problems with the car in the practice this morning, so they got very little track time to speak of, especially Manny, who we last saw forlornly sitting on the pit box waiting for a race car. And there he is in 11th.
Very much a GT3 neophyte, Manny Franco. Just over a year ago, he made his first ever GT3 start, and here he is within a second and a half of some of the very best GT racers on the planet. And look who's slotted in alongside. Alessandro Balzan, his season-long co-driver, but Lulu Wadu, Ferrari factory driver, joins him. I think everyone's excited to see her race here stateside.
Yeah, very impressive young lady. Has had great success already, winning a round of the World Endurance Championship earlier this season. So she's the real deal. And I spoke to Eric Bachelot about her and said, super impressive, super consistent.
Highlights from Q1, couple onboard looks. Difficult. Turn number 12 down off the banking. This was Adam Adelson for Wright Motorsports. Big weekend for them, trying to lock down a championship. Here's the Grove Racing car. Stephen and Brenton Grove and Earl Bamber. They've been going all over the world with that machine over the course of the season. And RS1, what a season Eric Filgaris and Stephen McAleer have had their first year racing together in the GT3 ranks. Got a Klaus Backler alongside. Should have a really good shot at a good result here this weekend. A couple close calls with traffic, but nothing that brought out any yellow flags. And at the end of it, Group M's Mauro Engel quickest in Q number 1. But we still have 2 more 15-minute sessions to go, guys. And when you start to average these times as close as this field has been, there's not much margin for error.
Good look there at the world-famous Hall of Fame and Museum here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, closed right now for what we have seen reported as an $89 million renovation. I can't wait to see what they're going to do. The collection is incredible. I've actually been down the basement where they, some priceless now vintage race cars sitting there under blankets and so on, getting some restoration work done maybe, rotating back up to the museum floor. Just a great place. And when it reopens, put it on your bucket list, race fans. Here's Amanda.
I can clarify a little bit on a confusion a little bit here on pit lane as we got qualifying started. You'll see behind me the 120 entry from Wright Motorsports. That is the 992 Porsche that we saw running here earlier in pre-qualifying, but there was a submission from the team to run the 991, but did not come in quick enough for them to be able to run it here in qualifying. Per the team, it'll be decided what will happen post-qualifying, but running in that chassis, the 992.
It's been interesting watching them bounce back and forth between the newer Porsche and the older one in GT America, the single driver format. We've seen Adam Adelson run the 992 car, but he and Elliott Skier have run the older car to great success in Fanatec GT this year.
I'd like to ask Amanda a question. We watched you there with your hair blowing everywhere. Amanda, what's the wind like down there in the pit lane?
It is actually pretty windy out here, as you mentioned it. You're also seeing the Ferrari there, Bob Varsha, on that 21 Conquest. The hood was off of this 296 about 40 minutes prior to qualifying. I know that they're going to be happy with the lap times that we saw, but it was a clutch that was changed over in pre-qualifying. So hopefully get going in that one.
Better to find it in pre-qualifying than in the qualifying session, that's for sure. So I guess they'll take their lucky stars on that one, and everything seemed to be in order. Manny Franco was up on the wheel.
Yeah, Lelou went out for that pre-qualifying session earlier today and immediately had some launch issues, which would have been related to the clutch with Amanda's update there. And you could see it's pretty heavy crosswind here on the front straightaway. So it's not going to affect the gearing too much. The two straightaways basically run parallel to one another. So what you gain on one stretch, you lose on the other, but could certainly have an effect on the handling through some of the twisty stuff.
I think that shot of the flags also showed us Roger Penske's next project, painting the flagpoles.
It is a beautiful sight as these GT3 cars make their way down the pit lane, getting ready to go. The clock already rolling in this second 15-minute session. Couple of teams still electing to wait around. Others, most of the field, in fact, eager to get out on track as soon as they can.
Yeah, it's big risk, right? Because we were in the driver's briefing yesterday, and they basically said if there's a red flag, the clock keeps running. So if you elect to wait a little bit, wait for that track to rubber in, typically in a qualifying session, whether we're talking about Formula One Grand Prix racing or here this weekend, the track rubbers in and gets a little bit quicker. So if you wait and you're patient, potentially there's more lap time to come while the tires are at their best as well. But if someone goes off the road and you haven't laid down a flyer, that can backfire on you pretty quickly.
Let me expand on that wisecrack about the flagpoles. What Roger Penske and his organization have done here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the short time they've owned it is just dazzling, I have to say. The place has really taken a step up in terms of amenities.
Nice recovery, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It is a wonderful place to come and watch a race, that's for sure. Just the second permanent purpose-built motorsports facility in the world. Only Brooklands in the UK preceded the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
New driver to our championship, Ben Tuck. Been drafted in this weekend, third driver in the 007. He's actually a teammate of VHC, as we like to call him. Valentin over with TF Sport in ELMS, so knows this Aston Martin well, and is actually one of the candidates for the young Aston Martin driver program this year. So if he has a solid weekend, that could aid his cause here and maybe getting that prize.
Now he is on a fresh set of Pirellis, as are all the number 2 and then the number 3 drivers. Each has a designated set of tires that they must use in their session, but the cars are fueled for all 3 drivers at the beginning. They cannot refuel between, say, first and second or second and third drivers.
Ben Tuck down Holman Boulevard here. His debut in North American racing. Mentioned Calvin, part of that Aston Martin Young Driver, or wanting to be part of the Aston Martin Young Driver program. That program produced Valentin Haseklo just a couple of years ago. So
he's now one of the judges.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Shoes on the other foot there. VHC has been a revelation racing at Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS this season, and has played a big part in his co-driver Derek DeBoer sitting alone by himself in third in points. Probably doesn't have a chance to go any further up than that, but still, it's been a great season. First full season of GT3 racing for Derek, capped off by this, the Indianapolis 8-hour. First couple laps starting to head up onto the timing screens, and Ben Tuck turns in a 125.9. Elliott Skier, Trent Hedman, Vesko Kozarov, all also out on the racetrack, as is Alessandro Balzan, who we watch here, awfully quick on his first offering at speed. Again, this is that Conquest racing car that they had to repair the clutch just a few moments prior to the start of this session.
Just missed it there a little bit in turn 1, got a little bit deep, missed the apex, so it's not an ideal lap, but good bounce back for that team, as we've already alluded to, missing a lot of track time here this morning.
CrowdStrike car in the hands of Nolan Siegel goes to the top of the list at a 123.826.
He's an impressive youngster. Speaking of impressive, how about Lucas Stoltz? purple opening sector, purple middle sector. That first sector just was surpassed a few moments ago. But Lucas Stoltz in the car that showed the way in Q1 at the hands of Mauro Engel, already displaying some of that same pace. Crosses the line. How about that? 1:23.1.
Yeah, a little bit quicker than his teammate, but we expect these times to get a bit quicker, as Bob, you alluded to it as well, in terms of the cars getting a little bit lighter with the fuel load being set at the beginning of all 3 sessions and not adjusted accordingly. This is a really good lap here by Onofrio Triazzi. Personal best. He had best overall sector 1 there for a little bit, but someone just pipped him, which is Lucas Stoltz. This is a really solid run. Ferrari's looking strong here this weekend.
That they are. Corey Lewis in the DXDT Mercedes AMG GT3 pops in the quickest first sector we've seen.
By the way, the times you are seeing on the left-hand side of the screen should be the average between the 2 drivers that have run so far. It appears that is the case. So Lucas Stoltz shown in P1, that is off the back of his hard work and that of Mauro Engel before him.
Yeah, that's the average there.
Exactly.
Right. He set a lap at 1:23.167 as the fastest time in this session, but overall, an average, they have a 1:23.2.
Stoltz, McAleer, Hidman, Oberlin. Good to see the American contingent running 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. I think a lot of the WRT cars, they're still sitting in the pit lane. And also Marciello actually just now starting to head out on their first laps out of the pit lane, as they did in the first session of this, taking that gamble that it's going to be a clean green session. They'll get out there in ideal track conditions with the best tires and have a chance to put up the best possible lap time.
Yeah, as long as they lay down a lap, the only thing that could really backfire if there was a major incident where it was red and they never even set 1 lap time of anything that was representative, that's where it could really hurt you. But they probably feel they're comfortably in the top 10. And again, the slate is wiped clean by the time we go to the pole shootout later. It's all about just being in that top 10 here.
Exactly. Right now on the cutoff, it is the Triarsi Competizione Ferrari, excuse me, that holds that position, but it is pretty close, only 15 thousandths on average, and just now they get bumped out of the top 10. That's going to be a moving target all throughout this session as we watch Bill Oberlin come across the line, and his new fastest personal lap is good enough to vault up to P4.
Yeah, McAleer immediately usurps him, as does Balzan, so it's rapidly changing here.
Here is one of the entries from the famed Belgian team, WRT, which will be campaigning prototypes on behalf of BMW looking ahead to next year, but still has its fingers in the GT Racing honeypot. A couple of BMW M4 GT3s here, including this one and the orange 6th rental car sponsored one coming down the front straightaway just ahead, and a couple of aces behind the wheel with Sheldon van der Linde and Maxime Martin. Van der Linde goes to P4, 3rd fastest of the IGTC Pro class competitors. Marciello just put in a blistering lap, including a purple final sector, to take the number 77 machine up into the 2nd spot on average.
Ben Tuck goes quickest. Wow, that's a surprise. That Aston Martin has some pace. What a performance by that young Brit.
Yeah.
23.0.
And with that, averaging with what Derek De Boer did, he's now the quickest of the Pro-Am class cars and just barely inside the top 10. As I say that, Chris Froggatt takes Sky Tempesta Racing in their Ferrari up into the top 10, now 8th fastest.
Gap from Lucas Stoltz in 2nd to Raffaele Marciello in 3rd, 2 1/1000ths of a second.
Yeah, that's in this session alone, and on average, gap 1st to 2nd is only 34 thousandths of a second. It's incredibly tight.
Solid lap here, lost a little bit in his middle sector, 2/10ths down on his best. It's across the line, about 4/10ths off his previous best, so maybe the tires have peaked a little bit. I guess there's a strategy involved if you wanted to burn a bit more fuel off on this second run, even if you're not improving lap times, to make the car lighter for the 3rd driver when he goes back out.
Maxime Martin, 5th fastest lap in the session. Marciello just went with the fastest lap in the session, and that's good enough to change the top on average. So it takes the 77 car from Craft Bamboo Racing They've had success here before. They go to the top of the leaderboard provisionally.
Sheldon van der Linde, about 3/10 back on the fastest time in this session aboard that bright orange number 30 BMW from the WRT team. BMW lead the IGTC manufacturer standings as we speak and could in fact clinch it before the final round if they have a big weekend here in Indy.
And Lucas Stoltz answer back. Not sure how much motivation there is right now safely inside that top 10. And as we keep reiterating, as long as you're in the top 10, you've got a chance to go for pole.
Now he battles.
Yep. They see which way the wind is blowing with just over 5 minutes left in this 15-minute session.
You obviously have an agenda here in these quali sessions, but you can also start thinking about what can we do to improve the car for that pole shootout here a little bit later this evening. It's going to be much cooler. Happens at 6:45 local.
Interesting that Maxime Martin decides to call it quits. He was actually up on his previous best through the middle sector, but ducks into the pit lane. Currently has that car on average third fastest out of the team car. IGTC Pro entries, unsurprisingly, 1, 2, 3, and 4. On board with the youngster Nolan Siegel. And the crowd strike by Riley Machine. He'll pop into pit lane. This team told me they chose Nolan for a couple different reasons. Number one, he's quick. Number two, he's driven with George Kurtz before and been successful, but they also said he probably has more laps around Indianapolis than anybody else in the lineup.
Yeah, I think he's raced here about a dozen times through his single-seater career, so a ton of experience here at Indy.
Twice this year in Indy Next alone, and has plenty of other junior Formula racing experience here at this track.
Thinking about that manufacturer's championship right now, it's all German. BMW, Mercedes, Porsche. This weekend they announced the new Corvette GT3 model. Can't get here soon enough.
Super exciting news. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, throughout the weekend, but a pair of them coming to Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS next season. Probably not there in time for the start of the year. So we look at the debrief here. Jules Gounon, Raffaele Marciello.
Pretty stacked lineup in that car.
No kidding.
Gounon coming off the pole position here last year, but he was disappointed they didn't get the race victory. However, he and Danny Juncadella did win here last month in IMSA competition, so he feels he's broken the Indy jinx, as he said in pre-qualifying here this morning.
Everybody I talked to felt like this race goes through them. They have the driving talent, the team is there to get it done, the Mercedes is a well-sorted package. Anything can happen, of course, over 8 hours, but if you're looking for a favorite within the paddock, that's the car.
The track is cooling incrementally at this point. It's lost about a half a degree Celsius, particularly in this shady section through turn 14 in the front straight. As Calvin mentioned, it's going to get much cooler.
Looks like just a couple cars are still turning laps here with 2.5 minutes to go. This is John Branham we're looking at, TR3 Racing. Had the spin in the opening session with Paul Keebler. And it's Matt Bell joining TR3 here for this weekend. Keep an eye on ST Racing as they make their way around the track. But while we do that, let's head back pit side to Amanda.
Well, Elo, it was your session that put the 77 on top after 2 qualifying drivers. I know we saw the debrief between you and Jules. I said you were trying to push it. Was there still more out there?
Yeah, I mean, it was my first time on new tires this weekend. So for sure, I mean, you can always do better, but I think it was a good lap. So I mean, there is not much more for us. For sure now, Jules, with less fuel, he could do even better. But I mean, it's more or less we are pushing, so it's difficult to go quicker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the newly minted Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS, overall and endurance champion. He became the first ever 3-time champion of the overall championship this year. Last year, he became the first ever 2-time champion.
Yeah,
just keeps adding the accolades.
The boy has some potential.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Let's give him a new nickname, Money.
6 total Fanatec GT championships when you factor in overall sprint and endurance over in Europe, plus countless wins in endurance races. One of the absolute top drivers in global GT racing, Raffaele Marciello.
And he's one of those young guns who had his eyes set on a single-seater career and elected to move over to GT racing. And boy, he is the real deal, just top drawer. And there's a number of that level of caliber of drivers in this field here this weekend.
Won an FIA F3 championship in 2013. Looked like he was on his way to single-seater stardom, but has carved out a very good niche for himself in GTs. Looks like that's about going to do it for Q2. Don't think we've got anybody else still out on the racetrack. This ST Racing car we're looking at, take that back. We do still have John Branham pounding around. John was a star back in Sonoma. Do you remember he filled in for Paul Keebler in a GT America race in a GT4 car? Started at the back, drove all the way to the front, and won in a 40-minute sprint. Now, he's the real deal. Professional stunt driver, racing coach, race car driver. Not a bad life. Driving a GT3 Mercedes here at Indianapolis this weekend as the checkered flag flies. Raffaele Marciello was the quickest in that session, but Ben Tuck was eye-openingly quick, second fastest out of this bunch, and that has TRG with a shot now to make that pole shootout.
They do, and it's going to be interesting to see what VHC can do in this third qualifying session here this afternoon.
Let's look at the results. These are driver 2 results. No, this is a combination of results, I think, after those first 2 qualifying sessions. And indeed, that is the case. We got a couple Mercedes provisionally set to share the front row ahead of a couple of BMWs from Team WRT. Then you get into the American runners with RS1 and Wright Motorsports in their Porsches. The Member World BMW of Oberlin, Hull, and Foley. Remember, Oberlin and Hull, they're undefeated in the Indy 8-hour. They've won their class each of the last 3 years. They'd love to keep that going. And then Conquest Racing after a pretty nice middle effort there in this session. Well, the star of Quali 2, without a doubt, was Ben Tuck from the Racers Group. Amanda, let's hear from him.
And Ryan, I can tell you there's a massive smile from Derek DeBoer just outside of the interview, and they called that the qualifying set of the session. Ben, why was this an expectation of yours here in Indianapolis?
Well, I mean, this is my first time racing outside of Europe, so I just wanted to see if I could show what I can do over here. And I think that was an okay job. I could have been a little bit better. I mean, I think it was, a 10th off Marciello, so that's what I'm looking for.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Spoken like a racing driver, never satisfied. You could always go faster, right, Cal?
You always feel there's a little bit left if you could perfect every of the 14 corners around here, but it's a really solid run, and let's not forget, it's all about just getting into that top 10. So I think when you look at those overall times after 2 sessions, Ryan, it's kind of the teams 8th through 12th. That's really where the cutoff is, and that's where the fireworks are going to be for this third session.
Ben Tuck, 2018 British GT GT4 runner-up, raced in DTM Trophy for the famed Falkenhorst team back in 2020. A lot of racing at the Nürburgring in recent years. Chance to go race in European Le Mans this year, and now the call up to come race outside of Europe, as you heard him say, for the first time. Not a bad venue at which to make your American debut here at Indianapolis, as we look back at highlights from a middle qualifying session, second of 3. Jake Walker, didn't get a chance to talk about him. Impressive young man, one to keep an eye on for the ST Racing team. RS1 doing what they need to do in their championship pursuit, and no surprise, this car remained fast one session to the next.
Yeah, certainly handing over between 2 studs like Engel and Marciello. The car's going to fly.
Jules Gounon flashing those lights.
Well, we talked earlier about getting the tires into the window and getting the most out of them in what drivers call the golden laps that are in a tire, a fresh one. Looking at the number of laps done by the top cars, very few. Best lap for a number of cars coming on the 2nd or 3rd lap, presumably only their 1st or 2nd push laps. Further down the list, you see cars doing their best lap on number 6, number 7. You got to get that time in right away.
Sometimes that relates to the experience of the driver. Some of these top pros are able to wring a car's neck and get it right on the threshold and limit very early in the run, versus other drivers need that repetitiveness and start to perfect the lap after lap. So some of that relates to how much experience you have.
Brief interlude between sessions gives us a chance to go back down to Amanda once again.
Well, we covered a little bit about the 992 earlier in qualifying, but what can you tell us about the drivability or what the handling's going on with the Porsche right now?
Yeah, you know, there's always a couple things that we're chasing, and ultimately we tried a couple things, didn't quite go as we expected, and losing yesterday due to the rain was not the best for that. Ultimately, we feel in a place that we're okay now. You know, we're now middle of the board instead of lower on it, so everything's trajectorying towards the right way come when the points are delivered at the end of tomorrow night. The Wright boys have put in unbelievable amounts of work over the last 2 days. I think we have checked every bolt and every bushing on this car, so we know right now we have a good platform to build on throughout the qualifying and into the race. The guys are doing a great job hanging onto the car as we are out there, and no, we're happy with the pace right now. It's an 8-hour race, so you don't have to be top. Obviously, it helps, but no, we now feel like we have a race car that can get us there.
You guys have quite the ringer for driver 3 here in the lineup. Callum Eilert, an IndyCar driver. How did this come about? And I'm sure he's carrying a lot of pride knowing that you guys are in this championship hunt.
Oh, absolutely. It's good fun having a friend in the car as well. Adam and Callum met years ago while Callum was still in F2, and the joke had been that Adam just started driving, Callum was in F2, and it was always like, oh, would it be cool if we raced together, just jokingly. And over the years, it became more and more of a serious statement to ultimately this place right now where both of their names are on the car. I've got to know him over the last 2 years or so, and just a wonderful lad to be around. Absolutely hysterical, and then having Callum Eilert in the car doesn't hurt as well.
Thank you, Elliot. Guys, I do believe it was a conversation that happened in Monaco, as they normally do.
Yeah, right, as one does when one is in Monaco. Talk to your neighbor, the race driver. And I like that new word I think you just invented, trajectorying.
Yes, I like that too.
I liked his hat. You see the Andile hat?
Yeah, that was cool.
It's a nice throwback. Let's look again at the session here. I think that was Elliot Skier behind the wheel. That means Callum Eilert will be up next. And talked to Callum briefly in the paddock this weekend. He said, I don't have many laps in this Porsche. Did a test, but not many. He does have extensive GT racing in a Ferrari, but he said there's really not much comparison from a driving style perspective.
Yeah, I think Porsche is certainly unique. I mean, I think you can jump between the various brands, but it does seem that the Porsche is kind of out there at a different point in terms of getting comfortable with it. But Callum's got such talent, such natural speed. I think the real key, as we talked about in pre-qualifying, Bob, is for these third drivers, when you get drafted into a championship contending car, is to really make sure you don't get too silly in terms of trying to prove a point, trying to look like a megastar. It's all about the ultimate goal of keeping that car in championship contention.
Back down to Amanda.
Well, Lilou Wadu will be the last effort for the 21 Conquest 296 Ferrari. And Manny, you've had your stint. I know you guys have been working through some issues here today in pre-qualifying and now qualifying. What can you tell us on the Ferrari?
It's a new car, of course. Any place that you go, setup's going to be new. Driving style might change as well. Honestly, the car is great in certain sectors and certain corners, and then it's a challenge, honestly. So.
Guys, I can hear tires going on to the GT3 machinery down here. We're almost ready for qualifying session 3.
Manny has been a revelation. Remember last year at the 8-hour, they put a couple different drivers in this car. Right. Manny stepped out after driving his first GT3 races at Sebring. They put a few in alongside Alessandro Balzan, almost like a little gong show to see who Manny's co-driver would be in 2023. And Alessandro came out on top, evidently, because he's done the season with Manny to this point. But it's been a slow build to this in a short amount of time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, they look good at the beginning of the year, then they sort of like struggle to really get the speed out of the race car. I mean, for Alessandro Balzani, the 3-time GT champion here in North America over the last decade, so he's got a ton of speed experience. He was involved with the development of that 296, so I think it was a great choice, but I know that things are up in the air next year regarding their driver lineup, still to be determined.
We watch the cars make their way out. This is the third and final session of qualifying. Again, top 10 rather, based on average, will advance to the pole shootout tonight. That will set the top 10 positions on the grid. Positions 11 through 22, though, will be set right here, right now in this final qualifying session.
Boy, that 50K pit lane speed limit really looks like a crawl from here.
Yeah, it's going to be brutal in the race if you suffer any sort of drive-through penalty. Essentially cost you 63 seconds just to traverse pit lane. So it's going to be one of the keys to victory is staying out of there unless you're just doing your regular servicing.
Yeah, that means if you're not within 20 seconds of the race lead, you will drop a lap to the overall leader with a drive-through penalty at the lap times we're seeing.
There's that crosswind we talked about across these two straightaways here. This one down Holman Boulevard.
Don't want to get one of those plastic bags in the radiator inlets.
Holman Boulevard, of course, if it's in oval configuration, that's the main thoroughfare through this 2.5-mile oval, named for Anton Tony Holman, Terre Haute, Indiana businessman who saved this venue from being converted into a housing development at the end of World War II. It had been left vacant, weeds growing up between the famous bricks. Did not look like it had much of a future, but Wilbur Shaw, former racing driver and champion in his own right, who was looking after the Speedway, looked for someone who would save this venue, and the Holman family, and later the Holman-George family, they were the stewards of this great venue until Roger Penske purchased it in 2020.
Mr. Clabbergirl.
Correct.
Clabbergirl baking powder was their company's big product.
And thank goodness it was saved, and we can be here this weekend to watch world-class GT racing at a world-class venue. Here is Callum Ilott. Remember, he did take part in the Indy 8-Hour 2 years ago when he was part of Ferrari's GT driving strength. They looked like they had a really good result lined up, and Callum ended up coming to grips and coming to tears with the GT4 car late in that race. That cost them dearly, but he's come a long way as a racing driver since then, plugged into this machine, and he knows that his two co-drivers have a season-long championship they're trying to win. His job is to make sure they stay in contention.
Yeah, he was a Ferrari contracted driver at the time. As you can see him really working the wheel. He is hustling this race car even before it's got fully up to tire pressure and temperature. They come out of the oven, so it's not like they're stone cold going on the racetrack, so they're somewhat prepared, but it takes probably a lap and a half to 2 laps to really get them into their ideal window. Then it's all about the strategy as to how high you started the pressures and how deep into the run you expect to go.
A dive back into the infield for Callum Ilott, who made his first ever IndyCar test right here on this very track. It's led to a pair of strong seasons for the Junco-Sollinger team in IndyCar competition. Still likes GT racing, though, would love to get a chance to do some of the big enduros if given the opportunity.
They just made a big announcement they're going to go in association with McLaren, I think.
That's
Technical
correct.
Alliance next year.
Exactly right. That Junco-Sollinger team will be sporting a bit of papaya, I think it's safe to say, when we hit the track in St. Pete for the IndyCar season next year.
Robbie Foley now on board, being drafted into this effort. Longtime teammate of Bill Oberlin, who co-drives this car on a regular basis with Chandler Hull, so he's an ideal candidate for that third seat now, a BMW Motorsport factory driver, Robbie Foley is.
And giving chase, the Spaniard, Daniel Huncadella, who I did ask him, how do you say your name, Danny? And he said, Huncadella. And I said, Huncadella? He said, that's actually pretty good. So we're going to go with that, straight from the horse's mouth, or the caballo's mouth, in the case of the Spaniard.
Well, he's gone for 3 straight here. He won this race last year, and then he followed it up. He and Jules Gounod won the IMSA race here just last month. So he's found the secret to success here at the Brickyard.
Really quick driver. His pedigree speaks for itself. Big part of Mercedes GT driver stable for quite a while now. First couple laps starting to head up onto the board. Robbie Foley quickest here in the early going of Q3. That has his Bimmer World car in a position to easily transfer, but still a long way to go. Neil Verhagen, the breakout star of the American season, though, just puts his ST Racing BMW to P1 within the session. And where does that move them? It moves them to 4th in the overall.
First lap under the 123 bracket, 122.8. So now we're talking getting down into the same range we saw here last year as this track starts to rubber up. These cars are a little bit later in this run. As we said, starts with the same fuel load for all 3 drivers.
Robbie Foley for the Bimmer World team, joining Chandler Hull and Bill Oberlin. This looks like it's setting up to be a personal best. He goes overall best in that final sector. Great lap from Robbie Foley. BMW's 1 and 3 in this session, splitting them. Danny Hugadea and Philip Ellis actually just now jumps up into the second spot, doing a really nice job for DXDT Racing.
Yeah, and Ellis won here in IMSA competition as well last month, so a lot of success from last month, transferring over to this 8-hour race here this weekend.
It is so close for that final position inside the pole shootout. Gotta be P10 or better. Gap from 10th to 11th, 64 thousandths of a second right now. That's averaging a best lap between 3 drivers in these 3-driver crews.
Like Verhagen was backing up there to start another flyer, so several seconds off and almost back into that Ferrari. May have impeded him a little bit. See how that one works out.
Charles Wirtz with a pretty good lap building. In the meantime, Jules Gounon has put up a blisteringly quick opening sector. That number 77 Mercedes is going to be one to keep an eye on. But here comes Wirtz, the Belgian. His family, WRT is their business, and he's got a nice lap going. Currently that car on average 3rd fastest, but Gounon is the man on the move. He has caught traffic, however. How much is this going to cost him here coming to the Yard of Bricks?
2 purple sectors, last year's pole sitter.
The Frenchman now racing under an Andorran license, crosses the line. He did lose a lot of ground there in the final sector, but it's still good enough to go to P1, not just in Q3, but overall here across the 3 qualifying sessions.
Yeah, really fast lap there, 122.6, so getting close to that 122.1 that he laid down in the pole shootout last year. Times are rapidly coming down.
Neil Verhagen has the ST Racing car, the quickest of the Pro-Ams.
Car didn't look to be totally flat there. I think it's okay.
That is one of the WRT entries. Charles Wirtz driving the Belgian. He's caught some traffic here in the form of Colin Brown.
This could get dicey.
Yeah, Brown doesn't want to give it up. He wants to start this next lap cleanly, so he was reluctant to let that BMW by as he starts a flyer.
Brown and the Crown Strike by Riley team, they'd be on the outside of the pole shootout looking in. 5th fastest of the Pro-Am cars, Lauren Heinrich. Done some Carrera Cup racing, but first time in a big car here stateside.
They led a test session here on Wednesday, Ryan, so this car has a lot of speed in it.
Let me ask you this,
good lap.
Calvin, if you do you think the teams already have their silver bullet, their quickest guy in mind? Should they make the top 10, or are they going to wait and see which of their 3 guys is quickest and then put that driver in?
I think typically, you know, for the big teams, they have already, you know, decided who's going to be the fast driver. But if suddenly if the track and the balance of the car has changed and one driver's uncomfortable, that's where you got to be honest. I mean, pros are pros. Everyone's got an ego in terms of you want to be the man or the driver, the girl behind the wheel for that pole shootout. But nonetheless, if you're uncomfortable and you feel your teammate likes this bounce a little bit better, give up the reins. It's all about the overall result and getting the car starting at the sharp end of the grid.
Neil Verhagen had a really good lap going, gave up a little bit in the final 2 sectors, though, unable to jump over Heinrich for the best position out of the Pro-Am class cars. Still 9th overall. That would have him inside the pole shootout, should it come to that. And ST Racing, they've sprung surprises. I think they did this here last year. Charles Wirtz has a personal best lap underway. This car comfortably within the top 10 right now. Cheever is on the bubble. And boy, that sounds like I could be talking about an Indy 500 qualifying from about 30 years ago. Eddie Cheever III, son of 1998 Indy 500 winner, in the 10th spot right now, which would be the final one through to the shootout.
Look at that 20 car, that's really solid. Goes fastest there, fastest lap of the day, 122.516. That puts that car up inside the top 10 well and truly.
Wow.
Eddie Cheever had the greatest line when they stuck a microphone in his face after winning the 98 Indy 500. He said, well, I had no idea that I had a chance to win this race, so I really haven't thought of anything ahead of time.
sponsor that day was Rachel's Potato Chips.
That's right.
Has to be one of the more obscure ones in recent memory. In any event, Matteo Cairoli here. What a great addition to this lineup for MDK Motorsports. A couple of youngsters I think could learn a lot this weekend. Trenton Estep and Seth Lucas, who have been awfully fast but are short on experience. A chance to share this car with a true ace like Matteo Cairoli. This has to be a valuable experience in their young development.
Yeah, so many great results driving for this Porsche brand over the years, recognized as one of the real superstars by Porsche. As you said, the young drivers on this team, they've had an excellent season. Ryan, they seem to have momentum right now on their side.
Cairoli put in his best lap that last time by. That got them a couple more positions further forward. Still at the back of the North American Pro Championship running cars. Those are the ones with the white number plates on the leaderboard left-hand side of the screen. IGTC Pro has the gold number plates, and Pro-Am has the white numerals with the black background.
So Bamber goes 10th in this session, about half a second off fast time. But the Grove Racing Porsche number 4 is Colin Brown, still trying to see if they can drag this car a little bit further up the order, currently down in 17th. I think there's too much of a deficit to get this car into the pole shootout here today. But again, it's all about the championship picture for this team. Coming into this round of the championship, 3 points back in the Pro-Am Fanatec GT point standings behind the 120 machine.
And that car currently is a few spots up the road in 13th right now. Callum Eilot doing a pretty nice job to secure that position. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward battle for the Pro-Am Championship in North America. Whoever finishes ahead of the other one is going to come away with the title. And I think both teams are happy with the fact it's pretty simple. You don't have to crunch the numbers. Everyone knows what you have to do.
I think you and I can even figure that one out.
Yeah, maybe more than anyone else. This is the Grove Racing car. Talked about it a moment ago. Earl Bamber currently driving, and it's his team that has supported this crew all around the world in pursuit of IGTC glory. But the Grove Racing operation, they're active in supercars. And again, this is the Bathurst 1000 weekend down under. So they'll have conflicted priorities, shall we say, here this weekend. I believe Porsche factory driver Kevin Estra is running one of their support series cars down at Bathurst this weekend.
Yeah, I saw him down there on social media last night. So everyone wants to run there. What a racetrack. We talk about iconic circuits amongst our IGTC calendar. Certainly starting off in Bathurst is a great starting point for this season.
Now still to come this year, the Gulf 12 Hours in Abu Dhabi, but next year you've got an IGTC calendar that includes Bathurst, Spa, the Nürburgring, and Indianapolis.
That's awesome.
Hard to beat. And 1 minute to go. I believe that was Christian Engelhardt we were looking at there. Reardon Racing, the team. Great to have them back. It's been a few years since we've seen them, but for many years, stalwarts in the championship. Everything from the touring car level up to GT3.
Yeah, Christian made the move from Lamborghini over to Porsche 3 years ago. He's had a lot of success over the years, and here in the States as well. He's won at Daytona, won at Sebring with Grassa.
This is a must-have lap for Earl Bamber and his team.
It's his best lap.
Yeah, but I think Christian Engelhardt put him in the shade, bumping his car, Bamber's that is, from 10th to 11th.
That's just in this current session for 10th. But as far as the overall goes, looks like Cheever and the Sky Tempesta team still solidly 10th. Does not look like that's in jeopardy at this stage. We look at Engelhardt here for the Reardon Racing team. He's got a nice lap coming together. We'll see, is this enough to make any difference?
Really nice lap, but unfortunately had a poor start to the lap. He's 4/10 down on his personal best, but fastest overall middle sector, so the car's absolutely flying.
Up to the Art of Bricks to take the checkered flag and end Q3.
Wow.
Great lap.
That could have been right up there. I mean, he's only 3/10 back, and he lost 4/10 on his personal best in Sector 1, so there was a potential fastest lap there by Engelhardt if he'd just nailed that first sector. That would have been a statement for the Reardon Racing team. They only just got their hands on that new Porsche and they've had very little track time with it. Actually felt they may have had a broken diff in the car. We're struggling with the setup and we're just getting it sorted out. So they're another team that really rued the fact that we had that wet weather here yesterday to try and get a bit more speed out of that Porsche.
Well, our top 10 is set, and it's an interesting mix as we look ahead to the pole shootout still to come a little bit later on here today. This car, though, what an effort for Craft Bamboo. The support, of course, from Lone Star Racing, based out in Texas. They've helped this Hong Kong-based team a number of times when they've come stateside. They got a chance to go for pole once again. No surprise when you look at their driver lineup, though, of course.
Yeah. I'd imagine Guno might be the, I mean, there's not a poor choice, right?
Nope.
That driver lineup, but the fact that he had the pole here last year and has had the fastest time, admittedly, with a lighter race car in that third session, he may be the pole guy.
It is an embarrassment of riches to choose from.
That number 20, Uber Motorsport Porsche GT3 Lauren Heinrich, that car sat on pole at Spa despite being a bronze entry.
Correct, that very chassis. It was air freighted here from Luxembourg not so long ago. Immediately pressed into service, set the fastest time there in Q3. But this is the way we head to pole shootout. The top 10 positions still to be determined in that shootout, but 11th on back, Cal. Those are locked in to start the 8-hour tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's going to be a fascinating 8-hour here because when you put the fast drivers in these machines, they're all within a few tenths of one another. So it's going to be a real fascinating race here. Championships on the line in both the Global Championship and the American Fanatec GT. So lots to discuss. It's going to be a fun one.
We began the day with beautiful blue skies, not a cloud in sight. Well, there's plenty of clouds in sight now. No threat of rain, we are led to believe. But boy, those clouds came on fast and full.
That they did. Sun's starting to go down. Temperatures will go down. That means we should expect some pretty quick lap times around Indianapolis for a pole shootout. Let's look at highlights from this qualifying session. Callum Eilert putting this Porsche through its paces. Not quite quick enough to move on to the shootout, but still a solid effort from them. This looked like it could have been a really good lap from Gunan. He did catch some traffic here, Cal, and makes you wonder what might have been. Nevertheless, big moment there from Charles Wirtz in the WRT BMW.
Just trying to widen that entry point, but just gets a little bit wrong. Gets those right side just in the grass enough to rotate the car a little bit.
The 999 that finished up Q1 at the top of the leaderboard still with this pretty stout effort. All told, they'll have a shot to go for pole. The Group M man filter liveried at number 999 Mercedes. Beautiful looking livery on this WRT car. BMW third and fourth behind a pair of Mercedes. It was the Mercedes show in qualifying. What do you think though? Anybody keeping their powder dry for pole shootout to come up?
I don't know. I think everyone's got a shout at this in terms of the various manufacturers represented. They've all laid down single laps that have been good, and that's what it's all about in that final pole shootout. One driver, one set of tires, go for it.
As you look at the skyline of Indianapolis, we have a lot to look forward to still to come here today. Pole shootout coming your way from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the Indianapolis 8-hour.